Hey guys and girls, so it's it's finally done. I think it was about 7.5 months of work, but the Viking sword is finally finished. It wasn't 7.5 months of work really. It was because I still have to make a living. I'm still supporting my family on what I do, so it was sort of worked on sporadically across 7.5 months, but all up, it's probably close to 150, 200 hours of work on this thing. I think, as a very conservative guess, it's been a lot of time to make this thing. But it's finally done, and I'm actually super happy with how it came out. Remember, this is my first ever sword. It's just, a sword is just a really big dagger, but still. I probably just angered a lot of people by saying that, but I knew what I was doing. I knew how to make a sword, but hadn't actually done it before. So, considering all of that, I think it came out pretty well. Like, this was for a very special occasion, something that meant a lot to me, that it was done right, and so I wanted it to have the amount of attention that it deserved. So, before I fully reveal it, my wife, who's very handy with a needle and thread, actually made a ceremonial sleeve to transport it in, made of linen and all sort of period accurate materials. And this is it here. It's a really nice way to put it, really. It's all sort of laced up with dyed jute, and it's reinforced at the bottom with thick canvas, layers of thick canvas, so it doesn't stab through, but it is deliberately not sharp because this is going to a wedding and they don't want any accidents. We don't want the red wedding from Game of Thrones here, but this is just a lovely way to actually transport this thing. And these laces are actually quite easy to come undone. All you have to do is just sort of undo the bow, and they're wrapped around the guard to hold it in place. And we have a sort of a top flap that can move aside and an inner flap to protect it. And there it is hiding in there. So let's pull it out and have a looky. How's that? We'll get some nice glamour shots of this at the end. Maybe with some cool backing music and make it look really, really cool. Hold me to that, I'm going to do it. But, yeah, this is it. It's done. And if you compare it to the original sketch, which I'll just grab. If you'll remember in the first video, I drew this. And we have this. So, pretty close, I'd say. I think it came pretty good, considering all I had to work off was a dodgy sort of Nico marker drawing. But it feels lovely. It feels lovely to hold, even though it's not really designed. It's way too ornate to actually swing things. But it does feel very, very nice to hold. That beautiful Otway Blackwood that was provided by Ryan, just incredible. That Otway fiddleback, the dude's a legend. You need to check him out. Pyrographied with Yggdrasil, the Tree of Life, and of course my logo. All the fittings, I don't know if you can see here, are Damascus, punctuated by brass provided by my good mate Lachlan at Valhalla Blades, and twisted silver wire inlay on all of the brass across the piece on both sides. The blade is monosteel, but it is hand-graved runes in there. It took a long time. A lot of patience required. And I believe that it fits what I was going for. If you remember all the way back to that first video, what I said is that my goal was not to make a historically accurate Viking sword. My goal was to make a Viking sword that you could take back in time and put in the hands of somebody that would rely on something like this, and they would be happy with it, that they would see it for what it is. And I believe I have done that. It's far more ornate than most things that would have been used in battle, but that's the whole point, really. So a lot has happened since the last vlog. I sort of was just head down, bum up to get this done rather than updating you at every different step of the way. I have been pretty flat out on this. So last you saw, I'd made this guard, and I'd sort of started making this guard. So this is called the upper guard, this is called the lower guard. Why it's called that, I don't know. And I don't even know if I'd started on the pommel yet, but if you followed me on social media, I kept people updated quite regularly with that sort of thing. This assembly here took about as much time as the rest of the sword combined. That includes hand sanding and engraving. Just this piece, the upper guard and pommel assembly. It has how many? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22 pieces and 10 pins holding that together, all of which had to be flattened and faced and etched and polished and engraved and shaped, and it is a lot of work in that one pommel and guard assembly. But it had to be just right so that the balance point of the sword would feel right. Otherwise, if it was too heavy, it would be like a rapier, and the balance point would be where your hand is. And if it was too light, then the sword would want to dip forward. But it feels remarkable in the hand, and I'm very, very happy with it. So yeah, that pommel was incredibly difficult to make, more so than I was expecting. It was sort of one of those things that I came up with the idea, I came up with the design, and thought I'll figure it out later. I figured it out, as you can tell. Like it's on, it's there, it's all bedded properly and everything. So there's never going to be rattle in this. It's going to be solid as hell. Not that this is going to be used, but all of this was broached out. This blackwood was broached out with my Black Dragon Forge handle brooch. It's very subtle, but you can see there is actually felt gaskets there and there slid over the tang to separate the wood from the metal, so that any expansion or contraction of the wood is actually, it's softened, it's got sort of suspension in it. Even though it's fully stabilized blackwood on its own is incredibly stable. Stabilized blackwood is incredible. It's like, may as well be metal itself, you know, it's all stone. But the gaskets are just extra insurance, plus the fact that when I did the glue up, by the way, the glue up on this was nerve-wracking. I covered this thing in blue tape, like comically so, to ensure that I didn't accidentally get spillage. And the felt gaskets actually stopped leak out from the epoxy, which was really quite good. And so it glued up very well and didn't have any issues. One thing that had to be sorted out was where the blade enters the guard. You'll see it's jet black in there. That's because once this assembly had been put into place, the gap in here, so that you didn't see any of the brass here, had to be flooded with epoxy, black epoxy. And I thought, what better way to make the epoxy black than to actually dye it with a historically accurate dye. And one of the oldest, if not the oldest known pigment that we have managed to find is one called lamp black, which is basically the captured soot from burning fats. And I used vegetable oil. I made a small oil lantern out of a glass jar and a wick and some wire to hold the wick in place. I held some stainless steel plate above it, and I captured the soot, and I used it to dye the resin that was flooded into there to make it black. And it came out just absolutely midnight black, and it couldn't have gone better, to be honest. But historically accurate dye in the resin, just because it's cool. And this is an old type of sword, so I wanted it to be historically accurate. I am absolutely stoked with how this came out. Sitting there engraving these was a bit of a pain, but I got you get a rhythm after a while. Very little blowout that had to be fixed, which was good. I just took my time with it, shallow passes, and it worked great. They're in there now. You can feel them when you run your fingers over them. They're never going anywhere. So this is actually going to be hung on the wall of the new owner's place. Almost like some people frame their wedding certificate. This is going to be hung on the wall because the runes, as many people have been asking, is the surname of the bride and the surname of the groom. And it is on both sides. Luckily, they had similar length surnames, only 1 character difference. It would have been a bit uneven looking otherwise, but no, it came out stellar. Very happy with it. Overall length, like I said, wasn't aiming for it to be historically accurate, but overall length is longer than I just pulled out. Overall length is 86 centimeters. Overall weight, I believe, was 1.14 kilos, if I remember correctly. I'm not sure what that is in pounds. It's lighter than you would think for a sword, but it's all fullered, right? A deep fuller all the way up the middle, and being well balanced, it feels very light. You could carry this all day and it wouldn't be a problem. Although it seems to have an inherent effect on people that I've been showing, that they want to treat it very preciously. It's got a bit of a presence to it, because it's one of those things that from here it sort of looks like a very simple sword, but then you get closer and you start seeing all of this detail, and that detail just makes you want to sort of treat it timidly. So we got the presentation side and we got the back side, which was typical of many ornate swords of the day, but I wanted to include the same thing on here, especially since it is going to be a wall hanger, which I am super glad for, by the way. After, like, they say that an artisan, when they make something like this, they put a bit of their soul into it, and I see a lot of my soul has gone into this. This is something I will, even though I don't get to keep it, this is something I will be proud of until the end of my days, and I hope that it will be beloved by the family for the end of their days, and I hope that their family lasts as long as this sword does, which is forever if they look after it. So yeah, Viking sword build done. Thanks for following along. Thanks for having patience with my shenanigans. But yeah, couldn't have asked for it to come out better than this, and I have to say. So my next sword is going to be, I don't know, something different. We'll see. If somebody's mad enough to commission me to make a sword, you know, if you've got a big wad of cash burning a hole in your wallet and you want something like this made, hit me up and we'll talk. I had fun making it. It was a monster of a project. A monster. Absolute monster. But I love it. I'm in love with this piece. It's going to be by far the most painful thing to part with that I have ever parted with. And that's saying something, because I was absolutely in love with the Mallard folding knife that went over to America. But this tops it. This is just, at this point in my career, I'd say this is my masterwork. So hopefully you agree. Let me know in the comments. Alright, so I did promise it. Let's overlay some music and get some gratuitous slow motion panning shots of this, you know, like Alex Steele does. Cue the music.